Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is all about contest prep. Most of you who have followed me for any length of time are probably familiar, I guess, with my competition lifetime. The last 5 years, I've done over 20 shows in various federations, and I'm very proud to say during that time I've won 2 world titles and I've placed either first or runner-up in the remaining competitions. During that process, obviously I get to talk to you about the ins and outs of how to do it. I think I've talked to you guys about I guess the art of fat loss and dieting and how to kind of be successful back to back. But this video isn't about that. I really wanted to talk to you about the difficulties and the struggle that comes along with competitions and competing in shows. And unfortunately, I don't think that this particular topic is covered anywhere near enough, considering the level of difficulty that I'm certainly going to share with you today. So there are about 9 points that I'm going to cover today, which some of you may have experienced during a fat loss phase. Some of you might not have experienced this at all. And I do want to point out that some of the, I guess, topics that I cover might be somewhat unique to people that are considering competing for a show because you are taking dieting to its extreme. So some of these may not apply to you if you're just doing a regular diet, but it's certainly something that I want people to consider if they are going to do a show. So the first one, or the first topic that I wanted to talk about is this external pressure or even an internal pressure to maintain your stage lean physique. And it's not spoken about enough. And I think even I have struggled with that for a long time. And we don't really see a lot of the fitness inspos, I guess. I don't really want to know I don't know what to call them. I don't want to offend them because some of these people are my good friends. So I guess fitness influencers, that's a nice word. They don't talk about it either. I think social media has certainly kind of given us a great platform to kind of share and talk about our experiences, but I think it's kind of in our human nature to just share the positive things. It's like the highlights reel, and we kind of only put up the good stuff. So I know for me, as a bit of like a personal mantra, I really try to make sure that I'm transparent throughout those processes, whether I'm having a great day or if I'm having a terrible day. So when it comes to being stage lean, I think that from a society standpoint, we have kind of glamorized the stage lean competitor physique. I think if we go back to like the 70s and the 80s, it used to be there was a societal pressure for females especially to be really skinny, and it's kind of transitioned, I think, over the years from this ideal slim physique to it's moving towards like a more muscular physique, which I think there are certainly some positives to that, because I think that's really giving women a bit of a chance to exercise their strength and learn on work on building muscle, which is great. I mean, resistance training is excellent in that sense. But I think that it's been blown out of proportion, and I'll have so many people contact me, particularly when I am stage ready, like, body goals, I wish that I could look like you, how do I do this? And I am really, really adamant at making sure that I tell people this is a competition. It's like any sport. You train for the peak, you go to the Olympics, whatever it is, and then it's done. And then you have a period of break, detraining, like mental and physiological break, because it is so hard. So I really want people to understand that if you're dieting with the intention to maintain that body composition, it is not realistic. There are a few small handful of people who might stay pretty lean. I'm not going to say that anyone stays stage lean because it's just unrealistic to maintain. But for the people that do stay very, very lean, they have a very specific or unique lifestyle that might cater to that. It might be that they have financial means to help them stay, within their macro budget, because they have someone doing all their meal prep for them. They don't have, and that's a big ask. The time that it takes to do meal prep for a show, if you've done a show or if you've competed, there's a lot of work that goes into that, especially if you are somebody that enjoys food and is a foodie. So for me, I'm not just going to eat the same thing every single day because I couldn't stick to it. So if I want to have some variety and diversity within the foods that I eat, a lot of time goes into all of that prep. So having the financial means to accommodate flexibility within your food choice, or have someone do it for you, or just having less responsibilities insofar as you don't have children. Like for parents or like mums and dads that are wanting to compete, I think that that's a great goal, but I don't think that it is something for a mum or a dad who just wants to, oh, hey, I want to look like that. It's not something that's realistic if you have other responsibilities. Same if you have a really demanding job. So I really want to make sure that you guys, if you're going to compete, that you've had these talks before you get on stage, that, okay, it's okay not to maintain that body, and to find a nice compromise that works with a normal, balanced lifestyle. So the second thing, and there is no particular order to this, I just wrote things down that I was thinking about. The second thing that is often not discussed is the mood disturbances. So, and this can also extend to like depressive-like symptoms. And feeling very withdrawn. When we are restricting calories, obviously there's less energy availability, and over time you are going to start to experience greater irritability, or increased frustration. So things that normally felt really easy, like, I don't know, getting stuck at a traffic light or someone cutting you off in traffic, like you name it, like pick something. Things that don't normally bother you are going to start bothering you. If you're running late for something, like you're going to just feel this anger inside you. So mood disturbances are really common, and it can be very taxing on anyone in your immediate circle, whether it is a loved one, your family members, friends. Being calorie restricted is absolutely going to have an effect on how you're feeling. And the further into that program or that fat loss that you're going, and the leaner you get, the greater those symptoms kind of become. They are absolutely exacerbated over the course of time. So I don't think that that's something that people really consider. Now, if you're in a job, for example, where you're expected to be friendly and polite and chatty, like a hairdresser, I can imagine if I was a hairdresser and I was competing, I would be the worst hairdresser there could ever be.
Have you ever worked with dreads before?
This is what you do. Moment this creature, blind him in the eyes. We got you. And we finish him.
Because you just don't have the patience for anything anymore. So I just wanted to put it out there. I don't think that people talk about it. Mood disturbances, absolutely, and it can be really hard on our loved ones. So that's something else to kind of throw in the bag if you're considering competing. So the next one is low energy and potential decreases in strength. So I think it's probably an obvious one. I think people will kind of correlate those two things. If I'm dieting, I'm probably going to feel pretty tired and fatigued. When you're competing for a show, the amount of fatigue is next level. I cannot even begin to compare how fatiguing it is because I've never done anything else in my life that was that difficult for that amount of period of time. You know, I remember finishing work late in the evening and still having, you know, a 45-minute cardio session that I had to get in. It was a high intensity one. I'm driving myself to the gym at 8:30 at night and I am absolutely exhausted, and every single step is like soul crushing. Like, it's very fatiguing. So again, if your normal day-to-day lifestyle requires you to be on the move, running around, you've got kids, you need to have energy to kind of run them around for their stuff, or your day-to-day job calls for you to have some kind of energy. Competing for a show is going to push you to your absolute limits when it comes to your fatigue and energy levels. And then also, it's very normal to experience strength decreases. Now, that might not happen immediately. Part of this comes down to the amount of lean body mass loss. So when we diet, obviously there is going to be at some point lean tissue loss. Now, if you are somebody that's really overweight and has a high body fat percentage, that risk of lean body mass loss is actually much lower than for somebody that has or is starting from a place where their body fat percentage isn't quite as high. So as you diet down and get closer to show, you are going to have had some, hopefully not a huge amount of lean body mass loss. Ideally, you would be incorporating your diet breaks and taking periods at maintenance so that you can mitigate some of that. But there's going to be some. And at a certain point, you are going to start seeing your strength go down. In one of the research studies that we haven't published yet, but we've got all of the, study design completed. We need to go back now and write it up. I personally, this is a case study on me, I lost about 8% of my strength from week 1, doing a 2 rep max squat to my peak week 2 rep max squat. So it's something that definitely will happen. And again, if you need your strength for day-to-day activities, you're going to notice it. And then of course, when you're in the gym, it's very normal to see a decrease in your strength. So you're not going to be able to lift the same amount of weight as you could perhaps when you started. So that's something to consider. And again, I don't think that is very well known or discussed amongst, I guess, our fitness influencers. So the next thing is sleep. So this, again, is due to some of the hormonal changes that are resulting from calorie restrictions. So when we undergo a diet, we have appetite regulating hormones. These are called leptin and ghrelin. So as our calories come down, and that's obviously going to happen the further into a prep we go, the lower our leptin level falls. Now, unfortunately, when we are hungry, it is very difficult to fall asleep. So falling asleep is obviously really challenging, and sleep deprivation is a real thing if you're trying to function and go about your day-to-day activities, let alone your job, let alone your training commitments. Making sure that you can prioritize sleep is super important, but it does become something to consider for those that are going to be competing. A lot of times we will hear of competitors complaining, or anyone dieting for that matter, that it's starting to impact their ability to fall asleep, and also it makes for an easier time being woken. So if you're already a light sleeper, the calorie restriction as you go through fat loss absolutely can make it harder for you to fall back to sleep, and you're easily woken. So we know that any disruption to our sleep actually makes it much harder to be compliant to our nutrition targets. In fact, there have been research studies that have shown that even 1 hour disruption to our sleep actually causes some pretty meaningful change in those appetite regulating hormones, which makes it harder for us to be compliant to our macro targets. So leptin obviously is the hormone that's being affected, whether that's due to some of the hedonic kind of, sleep regulatory systems that take place. I'm not sure, but there's quite a bit of research going on in this area right now, and I can't wait to find out more about it. But just that disruption to sleep, not only does it affect our energy levels, but it also makes it much harder to be compliant because it's also affecting some of those hormones that regulate our appetite. So now on to probably what is considered the most obvious one, and that is hunger and food obsession. So I think for anyone that's attempted a diet in their life is probably familiar with the amount of hunger that you can experience.
What's going on here exactly?
I'm so hungry, Bill. I'm so hungry. I never knew anyone could be so hungry.
And even as a flexible dieter and somebody that can pretty much fit whatever they want into their diet within, certain means. Obviously we have macro targets, and as you're dieting down through that prep, those targets get lower. But even if you have the flexibility, And I can't imagine how hard it would be as if you were prepping with someone that was using very outdated information and giving out meal plans. I can only imagine how much harder that would be, eating the same thing over and over again. That's another story. But the hunger goes well beyond what you've probably experienced before. So if you're going to be competitive in the federation that you're competing with, and your intention is to get up there and be in the top 5, you really have to go through quite a bit of cognitive restraint to say no. And I think for people that might have suffered from an eating disorder or disordered eating in the past, competitive bodybuilding isn't the way to overcome that. I think for me, as somebody that has suffered from an eating disorder when I was young, and this kind of stayed with me for 10 years, I think I liked the fact that I started to learn more about nutrition, but bodybuilding probably isn't the right sport for people that are trying to recover, because anybody, I don't care who you are, if you go through a restrictive period, whether it is just for a regular diet or you're getting on stage, there is going to be periods where you are required to restrict, and that restriction and that degree of restriction absolutely can increase the risk of relapsing, developing really bad nutrition behaviors. I shouldn't say bad, just poor nutrition behaviors like binge eating, and then compensatory mechanisms like purging. So I really want people to understand that there is a risk when you diet for a show, because that calorie restriction is beyond what's normal for the human body. We have all of these mechanisms like metabolic adaptation to prevent us from starving ourselves. It's a great evolutionary response to starvation, but we now live in a world where food is prevalent and we don't have those concerns of starvation anymore. But it is incredibly difficult, much more than you would expect. And food obsession is a real thing. And unfortunately, that can really pay its toll in your immediate friendship circles, family, friends, loved ones, because it's almost the only thing that you can focus on during that time. It's almost like you don't get any interest or happiness from anything else, because your body is hungry, and it's just driving you to eat the entire time. So food becomes this thing on a pedestal, and it's not necessarily healthy. Something else you probably didn't think of is your core body temperature. So as we get leaner, we have less adipose tissue or body fat, we can start to experience cold a lot more frequently. From personal experience, I remember walking into a restaurant in the middle of summer in Florida. Mind you, it's 90+ degrees, just an air conditioner in a restaurant. I sat there frigid, cold, freezing the entire dinner. It was absolutely miserable, and it didn't really matter where I went or what I did. Every time I went inside, I was absolutely freezing. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you're fighting all of these other things, low energy, low strength, you're already sleep deprived, you're hungry, your mood is already low, like just add cold to the list. Like it's just another thing that you have to be like, ah. So there you go. There's a couple more on the list. Here we go. So the next one is cognitive impairment. So from personal experience, I was trying to write the reverse dieting guide while I was prepping between Worlds, WBF Worlds in Bahamas in 2019, and right through until my December show, the pro show in Atlantic City for WBFF. And during that time, I remember trying to film like educational videos, put together content, work with my clients, and my ability just to string sentences together that flowed, that made sense. If I had a Likert scale of 0 to 10, my cognitive decline was significant. I would say I was functioning on about a 1 out of 10 at certain points, to the point where I was sitting in this exact chair and I'm pretty sure I cried because I couldn't put a sentence together. So if your job requires you to use your brain like mine does, it was incredibly challenging. And even to work with my own clients at that time, my pace was significantly slowed. Like if I was trying to meet a KPI for a company, if I was employed by someone, it would probably be really hard. So that's something else to consider. I know that we don't really think about these things. We're just focused on the body, but you do need to be aware of it because it's just not spoken about. So cognitive impairment is absolutely something that happens. You're calorie restricted. Your brain uses carbohydrate as its sole fuel source. So if you are restricting your calories, your brain is going to be getting some of that, but you also need to keep your organs functioning and all those vital processes operating. So things that are not important, your body is just going to go, heh. So like keeping healthy nails, forget about it. Growing your hair, not a priority. Like your body's going to provide or portion the energy to the places that it's needed, and it's going to hold off on all the other things. So speaking, exercising, moving around, like that's not considered essential. So it does become really challenging. Blinking slowly, talking slowly, forming sentences, really tough. So the last one is low motivation. And this kind of extends to not only your exercise and your training routine, it extends to your activities of daily living, and it also kind of rolls over into, I guess, another area which kind of is our social life. I noticed certainly that there is a feeling of disconnect and kind of an absence, and that's probably related to low energy in some ways, but also the cognitive decline that can happen when you're restricting calories. So thinking about motivation, I think most of us get into this because we really love exercising. I guess for many of us, we use exercise as a stress reliever. We do it for the social aspect. There are so many reasons why people exercise. But I do want you to realize that if you're going to compete, part of that passion is probably going to be lost at some point because it no longer becomes something we enjoy. It becomes something that you have to do. So I know for me, it kind of lost itself for a little while. I didn't really have the same passion for bodybuilding, during that time, and even afterwards for a little bit. There is a phenomenon known as the post-show blues, because you kind of do build up, you go and endure all of this difficulty, and then what? So I think the motivation aspect is really hard. You cannot be externally motivated at this point. You have to be doing a show for the right reasons. It has to be internal. So don't rely on external motivation to get you through. It has to be something that you truly want for yourself. When it comes to activities of daily living, being social, again, just having low energy availability, that's going to really decrease your motivation to do a whole lot of anything. I think a lot of people become a hermit during that time. Part of that is because so much of our social culture is to be, eating out. There's a lot of food, a lot of drink, and it kind of is very involved with that. So as somebody that's competing, it becomes really hard to have that. So if you are somebody that enjoys being really social and eating out, enjoying a glass of wine or having a beer with friends, you're going to have to say no at some point. Flexible dieting enables you to have those things if you want them. I was still able to incorporate alcoholic drinks maybe until like 5 weeks out, and then I was like, I have to start prioritizing food at this point because alcohol isn't very satiating, and I also want to make sure that I'm still training well. So if I'm kind of having some alcohol at the expense of carbohydrate, which is probably a better fuel source for training. So, there is a lot of compromising that has to take place, particularly when it comes to the social aspect. So another thing to think about, if you are somebody that doesn't think you're going to be able to say no in those situations, then I don't think that competing is probably the right thing to do. So guys, I hope that this helped you understand a little bit more about the behind the scenes of competitive bodybuilding, whether this is for bikini, figure, physique athletes, bodybuilders, all of this can apply, particularly at the pro level. I think even for some of the amateurs, we're seeing so many more amateurs coming in looking absolutely shredded, which is great, but that means that there's probably a lot more of this being experienced, and I just don't think people are talking about it. So it's not to deter you from competing. I don't want this video to be all negative, but I do want you to know about it. I think you need to have that, I guess, so that you can make an informed decision when you're competing. I'd be a total hypocrite if I said, well, you shouldn't compete because of these things, because I've done it myself for 5 years. But, you know, looking back, I can see, you know, there are a lot of things that don't work with my lifestyle. And it's probably one of the reasons why now I'm taking a bit of a hiatus from bodybuilding, because I need to get my life back. And I think so many people kind of, they think that when they achieve this body and they get down to their ideal, that somehow their life begins, you know, and now they finally be seen and things get better, and things get magically better. It doesn't work like that. Your life can start now. I don't think that getting to a stage lean physique is necessary, and I also think that it's completely unrealistic to maintain. There's a lot of sacrifice in order to achieve that. So I hope that this has helped your understanding of contest preps. If you have any questions, guys, or comments, please leave me a comment here below, and I will see you guys next time.